How do you pay for your homestead? That is one of the biggest questions I get from listeners, is how do you pay for this 5 acres or more that's going to become your homestead, and it's going to evolve into your small farm. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. First off, the money is the least important part of your homestead. Now, let me make sure you understand this. The money is the least important part, and here's why. First off, if you have a plan for your small farm or your homestead and it's implemented haphazardly, it's implemented the wrong way, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you will be in a hurt of situation. So for example, if you overbuild your house and you put it in a location that doesn't have good solar aspect, it's difficult to access, it required you to spend extra to prepare it because maybe you wanted a good scenery or you wanted good visuals, and now ultimately you put all this money into a house and you have no money for animals. Or when you do put up animals, they're so far from the house, you spend a lot of extra time going back and forth to the animals rather than having whether it's a courtyard style house or it's everything's kind of centrally located. If you're not planning where you put your home in relationship to your gardens and your animals, then you will waste the money that you have. Some people build these beautiful houses, their dream house, and then they realize they've overbuilt, and now they've got this giant house that requires a lot of work and maintenance that takes away from the self-sufficient part of the home, which requires a garden and maybe some animals. My point being is if you make mistakes, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how little money you have. And if you have a solid plan, that plan can be implemented where the land is affordable, where the home is affordable, and you can disconnect from some of the dreams and desires enough to actually achieve something. So let me give you another example. You can buy land and a home, no money down. So let's say you find a distressed farm and it's an older couple. They can sometimes hold the financing because they want cash flow, and you rent the farm from them. And so I've seen this in a number of occasions. They go off to an active living community, and rather than ceding all of their assets to the active living community, they work out a rent deal with you. So you're a tenant on their farm, and you're now renting to own their farm. So you're basically going to run the day-to-day operations. You're going to pay them rent, and they're going to get cash flow in small chunks rather than all at once, which allows them to have a better situation with the active living community. That's just one example I've seen. I've seen in other cases where somebody has gone in and not paid attention, and they overspent, and they built a great property, and they had to sell it at foreclosure because they couldn't pay the day-to-day bills. What matters more than your income, what matters more than the cash that you have, is your ability to cash flow. Meaning that once you get on that piece of property, have you found customers to buy from your garden? So a lot of folks will tell me they're going to go start their homestead, and then they're going to go to the farmer's market and they're going to sell produce. Great. How much money are you going to make at the farmer's market? So how many months is it going to take for you to have enough value, enough produce in order to sell at the market? What are you going to do when you can't grow enough food? You have to be willing to take a job in town. You have to be willing to work remote, for example. A lot of places today, you can move out in rural areas and get high-speed internet, work remote, and have your day job, but you have to account for, if you're working the day job, how you're going to take care of the animals. So what's more valuable than the money is your willingness to work on a plan specific to your dreams, desires, and outcomes. So again, you could work as a tenant on someone else's farm. You could own your own farm and start smaller and start with gardens and focus on self-sufficiency. That's what we advocate here at Prosperity Homestead, is that you start being self-sufficient where you're at, start getting used to measuring and getting free cash flow, and then reinvest that cash flow into the knowledge and skills that you need to do very specific tasks on 5 or more acres. Now, the thing about 5 or more acres is that if you've got a 5-acre lot, you can usually get a significant amount of garden space. You can get chickens that'll produce enough eggs for your family and a little bit of surplus, and you can put rabbits or goats or other types of small animals in a reasonable space, easy to manage. And that 5 acres can cookie cut to 50 acres or 100 acres or 200 acres very easily. Now, you're not going to have cows on this land, but you're going to have a nice postage stamp of a garden, a nice sustainable homestead. Now, you can do it on 2 acres, but again, that 5 acres is probably going to be on the edge of a town somewhere, so you'll have customers to sell product to, and you'll have enough space to have product to sell. This is about planning in advance. It doesn't matter if you have enough money or you don't have enough money. If you have a plan, you can usually implement it. So, for example, let's say you're outside of a major city and you want to do community-sponsored agriculture. And you've gone out and worked on other people's farms to see what it's like to run community-sponsored agriculture. You've gone out and worked for nonprofits. You've gone out and spent the time necessary to understand that, yes, this is what you want to do. Well, now you go out and find customers. Each customer puts up a certain amount of money, and that's paid for all the supplies and materials you need for the garden. Now you got the garden fired up. You're focusing on microgreens and things like that that consumers want, but are fast growing. You have put together a greenhouse so that you can grow or extend your seasons, and you're now satisfying a small group of customers off of even rented space. From this, you can then branch out and build out. You'll never go day one and have the full farm that you're looking for, but you can build into it with a plan and start with customers and utilize the customer's money in order to bootstrap what it is that you want to do. Now, you have to consider what your transportation costs will be, and there's a lot of other factors that we can talk about one-on-one, but the money is the least of the needs, because if you can demonstrate a profitable farm business, there's investors, there's banks, there's community co-ops, there's your customers themselves, there's family members, there are opportunities to continue to work while you're transitioning into the full-time homesteading or farming, and ultimately you will get there. It takes the mentality of self-sufficiency first. Wherever you happen to live, whatever you happen to be doing, get involved in some kind of community agriculture while you're starting to run the numbers on your own. You can pretend today that you have a farm and set aside the money that would cost you to run that farm. Even though there actually isn't a farm, you put that in a savings account or you put that in an investment account while you're getting your plan together for the farm. I hope this makes sense. I hope you understand that if you're not starting where you're at today, then you're not ready to have even the basic homestead. When you have your basic homestead, then you're focusing on self-sufficiency. A garden that's a sufficient size to provide food for your family and close friends. Then you're going to add animals appropriate for the property. If you've got llama out there and you've got animals that you don't eat, then you're not moving towards self-sufficiency. Because again, the animals are going to consume more than they're producing. This is the concept of cash flow, that you're earning money and you are only consuming a minimal amount of that money, and the remaining is free cash flow. Same thing works when you're feeding animals. You're feeding the animals are producing waste that is used as fertilizer for the garden, and they're producing meat that's used for subsistence for your family. If there's a gap in that where they're not producing fertilizer and they're not producing food and all they're doing is consuming, then you are on the wrong side of sustainability. Now, later down the line, you can get horses and llamas and ostriches and all these other things that you want, but ultimately, you have to do that after you're self-sufficient and when you have a little bit more free cash flow in the system. Now, it's not just cash flow. What about your time? If you're spending 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week at a job, and you've got to commute to that job, you may have the skills, but you may not have the strength to actually do the farming necessary to be self-sufficient or to create the surplus necessary to sell at a market. I know I'm hurting people's feelings. I'm not the most popular person when it comes to hard reality, but I want you to have 100% success rate with your small farm, homestead, or an estate. And if you start right where you're at today, you volunteer time at nonprofits, you volunteer time at other people's farms, you go, and a volunteer means you're not getting paid. Volunteer means you're learning the ropes. I know you can go to these homesteading conferences and take classes, but as soon as you take that class, you need to go find a farmer in your area and say, farmer, I took this class and I want to learn to implement these skills, and you already have the animals. Can I come work for you for free? Now, why are we doing this? Well, remember, it's when you're outside of being a farmer, it sounds all glamorous and it's beautiful, and you're going to be a gentleman farmer and you're going to raise these animals. But when you're on the other side actually doing the work, you realize the animals get sick. You have to feed these animals. You have to get up in the morning and take care of them when they're having problems, when they're birthing. You could be up all night. If you haven't experienced that, then you are not going to handle it as well as somebody who has some experience. And how do you get experience? Where you trade time for experience. In my case, I've butchered rabbits and I've butchered chickens, and I probably need to go through and butcher another 1,000 of each before I'm going to be confident that I could do that by myself. The fact of the matter is you can do it 100 times and feel like, know the steps and know the process. But until you get enough under your belt, you won't realize that that's an activity that needs more than one person. So if you're processing rabbits, yeah, you can process one rabbit all by yourself. But if you've got 20 rabbits to process or 100 rabbits to process, you need help. Same thing with chickens. Now, when it comes to larger animals, such as sheep or goats, or God forbid it's a hog or a cow, you definitely need more than one person. Yes, you can dress a deer all by yourself, but it's easier if you got at least one other person. Where do you think these people come from? Well, they come from you investing time, resources, effort in their activity, and then the community is developed that gives you a cooperative engagement where they'll come forward with their knowledge, their experience, and you guys are going to work together. So while you're getting started with your homestead today, you're building the community, which is more valuable than the money. Did you know farmers share equipment? Did you know farmers, if you've got a 20 acres of hay and you've managed it the right way, there's farmers that'll just show up and cut it for you in exchange for the hay they need for their animals. So there's a lot of bartering that happens in farm communities. Your homestead, for example, if you've got a bunch of tomatoes and somebody else has a bunch of cucumbers, you can buy out their cucumbers with your tomatoes and your tomatoes with their cucumbers, and now both of you do better. That community matters. That cash flow matters. That flow of resources through your property matters. All of that matters. You may not have the money today, but you can start building the experience. You can start building your plan, and you can start moving towards what is appropriate and sustainable for you. And then after that point, you start building surplus, and that surplus then becomes an opportunity to add cash flow, to add exchange value, to add community growth, and it will be successful. Again, there's a lot of folks that go out there and go bankrupt with their homestead. They go bankrupt with their small farm. They go bankrupt, and you can, of course, then step in with your solid plan, with your solid experience, and whatever money you have, and get into that opportunity. If you have questions about what I've covered today, you can always reach me at www.prosperityhomestead.org. I'm Justin Hitt. I'm a permaculture design consultant, and we help high-income professionals, affluent families with 5 or more acres create a sustainable homestead that's self-sufficient, and then help you move towards either the homestead cash flowing for you through a small farm or some other kind of money-making opportunity on your land. We do this in a way that gets results every time. The worst case is you'll realize it's not something you want to do. The best case, it's something you'll be able to do, and you'll be able to do it successfully. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next podcast.